In this example, we're going to show you how to create a form and also a process, and we'll use the form to submit some information. And then once that form is submitted, the process will use that form data to make a decision. In this case, we'll, as an example, we'll do a purchase order form. So let me go ahead and create a form. Let's call it purchase order. In order for things to line up properly, I'm going to go ahead and use the Bootstrap grid control. And I'm just going to add another column also. We don't need that big of columns. So, and I'm going to add a couple of couple of the rows. So duplicate. Actually, we might not need all these. So I'm going to go ahead and remove one of the rows. So let's put a label control. And I'm going to go into the properties and call it enter PO amount. And let's also use a text field. And we're going to set this to be a numeric value. And the ID is going to be, let's say, TXT PO amount. And it should be greater than 0. And say required and save that. I can also, next, let's put a submit button. So we're going to go here to submit. Let's put that. And let's call it submit PO. Save that. We can also hide this border on the grid. So if I double click here, I can go into styling and say none. And save the form, and we can do a little preview of the form. As you can see, I have a little form with the PO amount that is a required field. So now, next thing, let's go ahead and build the workflow process. So we're going to go into process definitions and create a new process called, let's say, purchase order def. The first thing I have to define is a variable to get a pointer to the form, since we're going to start with the form and then the process is going to start. So I'm going to define a variable called form ID. It's a string data type, and add that. And the next, what we want to do is, if you look in your toolbox, you will see a forms section on this. We have various steps to deal with forms. So I want to get the value of the PO amount. So you will see a step here called, that says get form field values. Okay. So here I'm going to go ahead and connect these. And let's go ahead and select the, so here's the purchase order form. And the variable or global that holds the form ID is variable dot form ID. Here we can also do a mapping. We can say I want TXT PO amount to go to variable dot, let's say, PO amount. So as you can see, I'm using a variable that is actually not even defined. But if I go to save this definition, okay, you will see that it will automatically detect that PO amount is not defined, and it's asking me to define that variable. So let me go ahead and select number and save that. Now that we have got the PO amount, so let me call it get PO amount here. We can do a decision to see whether that PO amount is greater than a certain number or a value. So I'm just going to type decision. And in this decision, let's check if PO amount is greater than $100. So the way we use expressions is we do variable dot PO amount greater than 100 and save that. And for this example, I'll use the placeholder steps. And we can say go to one placeholder if it is true, otherwise go to another placeholder if it is false. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these two steps. On these connections, you can see I have a link value of none. That means it's going to go to the next step no matter what the outcome of this decision step is. So in this case, we only want to go down this path. Let's say if it is false, if this expression produces a false, I can also change the color here to red. And on this particular connection, I can say if it is true, go down this path, and we can change that to green. And that's it. That's all we have to do. Let's go ahead and save the definition. And now let's go ahead and create a form instance and run the form and the process. So if you go to form definitions, and let's go ahead and select the form and say execute with parameters. Here we have to make a couple of selections. It's asking what process to start after the form is submitted. So in this case, I want to start the purchase order def. I want to pass the form reference into a variable. In this case, it's going to be form ID. And I can also select the default language. Once you have made these options, I can also say save this form URL. And if we go back to forms or form definitions, you will see that I have a form URL now available. This is great for testing purposes. I can always launch this now. I can click on this and it will launch the URL to the form. And let's go ahead and enter some value, 466. So the form was submitted and completed. So if you look at form instances, you would see that we have a new form instance, purchase order dash with a grid. And also if you look at process instances, you will see a new process that started and it's already processed with the status of completed. And if you double click and render it, you will see that it started off with the start step, got the PO amount, and then went to the decision step. It compared if the amount was greater than $100. Since we entered 466, this produced a true, and it went on to the next step. This is how you would start with the form, and once the form is submitted, have the process automatically start. Thank you.